Hi, my name is Therese Besker, and I will today present the paper called Navigating the Cybersecurity Risk and Economics of System of Systems, which is a study that I have conducted together with my colleagues Ulrich Franke and Jakob Axelsson, and we all work at RISE Institute of Sweden. Today, there is quite a lot of research conducted that addresses cybersecurity in the form of example, the risk of being exposed to an attack, but these studies usually model individual nodes in a network, which means that these studies do not always consider the risk associated with integration and interconnection of different systems in an SOS context. And we see that understanding, analyzing the risk in SOS environments are quite challenging for at least three different reasons. First, we have for example, the complex interdependencies, which means that different constituent systems may behave under different circumstances and thereby risk that an incident at a single constituent system may compromise the entire SOS. We also have non-technical aspects to consider for risk analyzing in the SOS context. And this refers to, for example, lack of policies and compliance. It can also be lack of security, culture, or trust, which all may contribute to incidents in SOS. Finally, we also have diverging incentives to consider among the constituent systems, and also this situation where constituent systems evolve over time, making it quite necessary to have a broad and a life cycle oriented perspective on security risk analysis. This study proposes a quite novel perspective on cybersecurity in SOS, and that is the joint of cybersecurity and, together with, information security economics. We have seen that the economics of cyber and information security has grown into a quite fruitful discipline in the past 2 decades, but we have not seen that these lines of thought have gained attention within the SOS community. We strongly believe that the tools from economics have the potential to be a valuable complement to the more traditionally design-focused tools employed in the SOS engineering field. Well, as I just said, we have seen that cyber and information security economics has been increasingly studied over the past decades. And within this topic, there are some quite interesting areas that are especially interesting within an SOS context and that I would like to highlight in this study. I will say some words about each of these four areas in the following slides. First out is the externalities, since we know that there is often underinvestment in preventing externalities within an SOS context. Since a constituent system does not bear the total cost of an incident but exports some of it to the rest of the SOS, this constituent system cannot be expected to invest as much in security as desirable for the entire SOS. And we also have the issue of asymmetric information. And an example of this is the imbalance in payment of security between, for example, buyer and vendors. From the buyer's perspective, for instance, if secure software cannot be told from insecure software, then there is no reason to pay more for security. And likewise, from a vendor's perspective, spending the resources necessary to create secure software is difficult if no buyer is ready to pay for more security. And now we are moving on to the difficulty of risk sharing. Well, cyber risk can be managed in many ways beyond investing in controls to minimize them. But in particular, risk can be shared with others. Immature risk management is emerging SOS could stifle innovations so that technical feasibility and value-generating collaborations never get off the ground because the parties cannot agree on how to share the risk involved. And finally, we have the issue of allocation of liabilities. One key SOS relevant insights from the cybersecurity economics can be summarized as follows. Policies and legislation must coherently allocate responsibilities and liabilities so that the parties in a position to fix the problem have actually an incentives to do so. And now some words about security in different SOS archetypes. Since there are different archetypes of SOS, there may be differences in how sensitive each type is to various cyber attacks. We have in this study used the recent definitions in the ISO standard of SOS, and I will cover the 4 different archetypes of SOS in the next following slides. First out, we have directed SOS. Analyzing the SOS security in a directed SOS is perhaps the most straightforward case, since it essentially relies on the communication of each consistent system with a central system, which is responsible for security negotiations among the constituent system. This implies that communications, security requirements, and properties may be managed in a centralized way. Managing this security in an acknowledged SOS requires commonly a distributed and decentralized organizations, where each constituent system administers the mutual agreement and should cooperate and coordinate with other constituent systems, meaning that the central entity does not have sufficient mandate to control the fulfillment of the security requirements of each constituent system. And this means also that each constituent system must guarantee to behave correctly, by example, in a compliant way concerning the set of security requirements agreed upon. And now moving on to collaborative SOS. From a security perspective, functionalities may manipulate the data shared between the different constituent systems in the SOS, which clearly introduces exposures to the privacy of the data in the SOS. And one key challenge for the security in this type of SOS is the establishment of the general criteria that defines the shared security concept. This means that every single constituent system must agree with the security requirements, and it is however essential to note that governing the security requirements may require a jointly agreement phase among the different constituent systems. And now some words about virtual SOS. Well, from a security perspective, this SOS type presents more difficulties when analyzing its weaknesses, because there is not a central entity that may guarantee security, and neither do we have an agreement defines what should be the proper behavior. However, due to these loose collaborations between the different constituent systems, the weaknesses might have a minimal impact on each single constituent system on average. So, one of the perhaps most interesting questions at this stage is what can be done to increase SOS cybersecurity? Well, in this study, we have specifically focused on 5 different cybersecurity policies options, which I will describe in the next following slides. Okay, first out is ex-ante regulations, which means that systems are designed to prevent incidents by adhering to rules, meaning that ex-ante regulations is only possible if there are rules to adhere to. So if interaction guidelines are the only kind of rules, then ex-ante regulations is only possible in collaborative or acknowledged SOS. But if other kinds of rules may include security standards, ex-ante regulations may also be possible in other types of SOS type. So, and moreover, in a directed or a collaborative SOS, a central entity or a keystone can enforce the regulations by excluding non-compliant constituent systems. And finally, in a virtual SOS completely lacks rules, there is by definition no ex-ante regulations. And we also have ex post liability, which means that Anyone causing an incident has to bear the cost of it afterwards, hopefully preventing incidents in the first place. Extracting such a cost upfront from the guilty party may require a central entity and possibly a broader legal government where courts outside the SOS environment assisting. Moving on to information disclosure. The logic of information disclosure is that if asymmetric information can destroy both supply of and demand for security, then supplying the missing information may rectify this. Information disclosure is a widely applicable mechanism in the sense that it does not require central entities or interaction guidelines per se. Uh, for example, if a system vendor A has 1,000 cyber incidents per year and vendor B has only 10, buyers will most likely shift from A to B if this is disclosed. And we know that there are powerful incentives not to disclose informations or incidents in an SOS. Guidelines mandating disclosure and a central entity to enforce the guidelines may assist in this sense. Moving on to insurances. Insurances against cyber incidents offer several different benefits. For instance, an insurance can share risk with a group of different actors collectively and thereby removing the need for a large cash reserve from each individual constituent system. And from a CS perspective, we see that insurances may be a quite applicable mechanism which does not require any central entities for the management of the insurance. But without a good data for assisting proper pricing, cyber insurances can be quite tricky to be correctly calculated and formulated. And now we have come to the final possibility of cybersecurity policy options, which is indirect intermediary liability, which means that a third party is held responsible for someone else's wrong. This may seem counterproductive, but it may be a quite helpful strategy when it is difficult to capture the actual wrongdoer or high transaction costs make it infeasible to draw upon explicit contracts. An actual example of this outside the SOS context is the way banks, as a third party, are held responsible when a fraudster, as a second party, skims the credit card of a victim. And we all know that the bank takes the cost from the victim. In an SOS context, indirect intermediary liabilities is similar to ex-ante regulations in that it requires interaction guidelines outlining the liabilities, but is even more dependent on a central entity to enforce it. And now I would like to conclude what I have presented using 3 different bullets. Well, first we saw that the increasing adoption of SOS, cybersecurity risks have become more necessary and challenging to manage. And the second was, it is important to have a comprehensive understanding of the different SOS archetypes and their various related cybersecurity policies. And the third one, different governance tools will vary in effectiveness and appropriateness over the different circumstances characterizing the SOS archetypes. And finally, I would like to say that due to the time limitation of this presentation, I couldn't, unfortunately, not cover all information in our paper, meaning that there are even more interesting material left. So I really would like you to recommend to read the full paper. And with this, I would like to thank you for listening to the presentation. And I also would like to say that please do not hesitate to reach out to any of us if you have any questions or would like to discuss this topic further. Thanks for listening. Cheers.